Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another video. First things first, anything said in this video is not intended to be financial advice. It is strictly opinion content, and please know that investing in anything across the markets is extremely high risk, and I am most certainly not a licensed financial advisor. So, with that understood and out of the way, let's dive into the big topic at hand, which is Ryan Cohen's latest interview. Now, in this interview, he said several really interesting things. And I think for the people that have been clamoring, and let me know in the comments too if you think that he satisfied any of your questions, or you liked his tone, you liked his kind of candid nature, or it maybe you want even more details. But I think this was the most kind of details and candid nature that we have gotten from Ryan Cohen in quite a long time. Now, he is the CEO and chairman of a publicly traded company, and Wall Street could employ nefarious tactics, if you will. And I'm speaking in broad strokes there. They might not if he was to delve too far into his corporate business. But I thought at the top, and let's dive into the biggest themes here in a second. I thought this was a good showing for him overall. I like his style. He really reminds me of an Elon Musk, not in a sort of tech visionary element, but more in a I'm just going to say what I'm truly thinking. I'm not really going to hold back. However, and let's roll the first clip here, he was very careful and took long pauses before saying certain things, and when asked certain questions, I think is quite telling of either the fact that he's legally trying to be careful, whether there was a lawyer in the room or not. I think that's anyone's guess. I doubt it. But clearly he's trying to be very coordinated and precise with what he says. So let's listen to this first clip. This is Ryan Cohen when asked about how he's intending to deploy the 9+ billion or roughly thereof of cash and cash equivalents that the company has in its war chest. Take a listen, because this is the exact same answer, and you've probably heard it before, that he gave in his July interview with Charles Payne on Fox Business.
Is pretty much down the middle.
Does that mean you're waiting? You're waiting for a crash?
You never know what's going to happen in the financial markets. They can go from green to red, and they don't flash yellow. So when that happens, we'll be in a position.
When that happens, we will be in a position. He is telling the GameStop shareholders word for word what he intends to do with the $9 billion that they've raised. And he said when, not if. I think that's a rather big distinction. And it kind of reminds me of the old adage that you never have to remember anything if you don't tell lies. And because you're just saying what you truly believe or what actually happened. And Ryan Cohen, to say this exact same line about the capital markets and financial markets not really flashing yellow before going green to red, I think it's indicative of his viewpoint that things might be overbought across the market. And I don't mean, that GameStop is going to be looking at SPY necessarily. And we can pull the SPY chart up here and show that it's just dollars off all-time highs. I don't think, necessarily that's what he's talking about, but in terms of being at, an inflection point, or, Wall Street setting insanely high expectations for the Mag 7, which accounts for the majority of these gains in SPY, could we see an extended downturn here? Probably. And there's a lot of gaps to the downside on SPY. We all know that if you're in a TA, that's all well and good. But I think the fact that Ryan Cohen repeated that same line is indicative to me that he's going for a more value-oriented ethos, and he's looking, or deep value rather, if you will, and he's looking for a pitch that's right down the middle. So maybe someone comes along with a pitch deck that says, hey, we can, offer hundreds of millions of revenue, quarter after quarter for your business. Maybe they sign off on something like that that's right down the middle. Or maybe they're building this war chest a la Berkshire Hathaway, like Warren Buffett did, to where, you kind of sit on your hands, you wait, you see how things unfold. And if Ryan Cohen believes that the market is due for a pullback, maybe that could be, and maybe it will happen I don't think that there's any expectation that he's saying within the next few months. He certainly said something interesting, which we'll get to in a little bit at the end of the video, about his maybe time horizon for these things. But realistically, I think when people criticize the company or all these dilutions and all this and that and the other, they want a plan. Well, he's told you twice now what this plan is. They're going to wait until value presents itself. And we'll get to the Roaring Kitty clip next because I think that one is probably the most exciting for everybody. But I did want to emphasize something else I thought was extremely important that Ryan Cohen kept referencing in this interview. When asked about his sort of story and why he got into GameStop, he mentioned at first being a passive investor and then became more activist as time went along, and he learned more about the boardroom and the mismanagement of funds, etc. But when probed about his Chewy experience and launching that, he gave some really interesting business insight that I think speaks volumes of how shrewd and kind of prominent he is in that space. He said something to the effect of when he started Chewy, initially he had $100,000-ish that he went to buy jewelry with and was going to start an online jewelry store, until several weeks later he went into a pet shop and saw that they weren't servicing, or had the products needed for the customers for their pets. So he decided to launch Chewy within quarters, several months of being public. They were doing 2 point something billion quarter after quarter in revenue. We can pull that up. So, Ryan Cohen's business acumen is top of the line. It's not to be taken lightly. Now, what's interesting about this, you can see $1.3 billion, $1.7 billion, 2 point something, and now all the way up to 3 point something billion. That's a lot of money that Chewy is bringing in. And he basically said that inventory wise, they just wait until everything sells out and it takes care of itself. It reminded me perfectly of Power Packs and their new ventures into collectibles, where they buy the inventory, they put the capital up front, and they basically just mark it up and resell it. It appreciates over time. It's a perfect reoccurring revenue stream that's pivotal for the company. Even more important than his business acumen is the fact that he has skin in the game. Time after time after time in the interview, it must have come up 5 or 6 times, he kept saying that he is in the arena, and you can see that here with his 37 million shares and change, accounting for nearly $1 billion worth of his own capital in the company. It is in his best interest for the company to succeed. It's in his best interest for the company to be around decades and centuries. And if you think of it, it's really a war of attrition. It's not necessarily that there will be no price action for 10 years or 100 years. Cue in the 84 years famous line here. More so that he is going to build something safe and revenue generating that all of Wall Street and their games and the shorting and the basket swaps and the insane amount of activity that has happened around this particular equity in GameStop, he can outlast them. The war chest can outlast all of those games, and eventually they might have to pay up. That's what I took from that. In addition to that, having a CEO and chairman that is personally his entire livelihood and his future generations' entire livelihood is dependent on his success with the company. It does not get any better than that. For the part everybody's been waiting for, the Roaring Kitty question and chatter. Just to give a little bit of background here on this situation. In June or May of 2024, when Roaring Kitty returned publicly, he obviously posted the stock chart update on April 24-ish of 2024, April 29, maybe it's the exact day. But when he came back publicly, it was speculated that Roaring Kitty was trying to amass an amount of shares that he would cross the 5% threshold ownership and force his way onto the board potentially. Now, that was tinfoil at the time. It kind of came and went quickly, and then Ryan Cohen diluted in the June shareholders meeting with an at the money offering, and then Roaring Kitty obviously with the 13G and Chewy and this, that, and the other, and then he dumped Chewy. But the backstory was, and that was a popular theory at the time, now Ryan Cohen is straight up being asked about the potential of working with Keith Gill, a.k.a. Roaring Kitty, a.k.a. Deep Effing Value, at GameStop.
Like with Roaring Kitty, you guys talk much?
Ask him.
Okay. Yeah, we'd love to have him on the show. Maybe we'll
get him on the show.
That'd be a lot of fun. He's we're pretty new to the live streaming thing. I always enjoy talking to people who operate in the same medium, and so I'm sure we'll have a good conversation.
Yeah, we don't want day traders. We want. Yeah. I'll have a conversation with him if he's focused on decades and centuries, not on making quick buck.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
I like it.
Well, yeah. Well, we're rooting for you for the next decade, for the next century, for the next millennia.
Lots to unpack with that answer, but first things first, it kind of reminded me of the Dumb and Dumber phrase or quote where Jim Carrey's saying, "You're telling me there's a chance?" And of course, it's like a 0.1% chance, but there's a chance. Essentially, Ryan Cohen here did not say no when asked about working or talking with Roaring Kitty. He said to ask him instead, which I find very interesting. And then secondly, the part that is probably sticking with more people is this decades and centuries quote and not looking for day traders. Well, Ryan Cohen, we just said, has almost $1 billion of money in GameStop shares. So he's obviously looking for someone that's viewing things with a long-term lens. But if you're connecting the dots between the two most important things that Ryan Cohen said is that, one, he would have a conversation with Roaring Kitty. That's obviously hyper important. 1A, as important, was the fact that Ryan Cohen is waiting to deploy this war chest of capital for maybe a more opportune time in a crash scenario. What does that remind you of? It reminds me of deep value investing, which Roaring Kitty became famous from. Internet famous, literally off the concept of deep value investing, which he saw with GameStop, made his initial purchase. The rest is history. That fits this ethos perfectly. Now, in terms of what could happen, what could they talk about, what would the conversation be about? Maybe a board seat is up for grabs. Maybe it would be something that, Roaring Kitty could advise GameStop on deploying their capital, using some of his kind of knowledge about the financial markets would be very appealing, I think, to Ryan Cohen. Now, the other thing that I think is important is Roaring Kitty has not been seen since posting the January 2000-ish meme with Seymour and the dog and waiting for its owner to come back. It's unclear if Roaring Kitty still owns GME shares. I personally, in my gut, feel like he does, but you can't know unless you have a filing or something to that degree. But the fact that Ryan Cohen is said that he's open to this idea essentially is monumental, because that would be a walk-off grand slam in the bottom of the ninth, World Series Game 7. That is the moment, chills inducing type idea for any GameStop investor that would have 110% faith rather in management if Roaring Kitty were somehow involved. So that is kind of monumental news. Of course, algorithmically, nothing happens, no reaction at all from the buy and sell algorithms, probably because Jane Street and company, I'm just kidding, I don't know who it is running these things. But in practicality and in terms of thinking about what does this mean, where is this heading, reading the tea leaves, obviously Ryan Cohen is open to these things. Obviously they have amassed all of this amount of money for a reason, which now we know, heard it twice now, they are waiting for some kind of correction, some kind of economic downturn to deploy this capital, all while the fundamentals of the business and the profitability of the business is improving. You really can't find a much better situation than that, in my opinion. You have great leadership in Ryan Cohen, who I also want to say, yes, he appears a little bit brash at times and says some, bad words and controversial, edgy things, but like I said, it reminds me of kind of shades of Elon Musk in terms of like, you can't appeal to everyone, but at least you have someone that's very bright leading the way. I have zero problem with it. Some people might feel differently. Let me know what you think. I personally like his style. I like the candid nature. I like getting the true personality and not some uptight, like, corporate oil tycoon CEO that doesn't say anything. I like what we have in GameStop CEO. So let me know what you think about Roaring Kitty, you know, potentially working with GameStop. My personal kind of spin on this is overall a very net positive for GameStop, and their initiative to go more public with Ryan Cohen is actually intentional. You can see that GameStop hired a PR person in February of 2025. Nicole Robles joined as their communications head, and essentially they want to create a PR blitz strategy where Ryan Cohen is going to be doing more media appearances. We saw him do the Bitcoin conference. We saw him do a CNBC Squawk Box interview, which was totally one-sided, and the host Andrew Sorokin was peppering Ryan Cohen out, Wells Fargo and Apple, and it's like, who gives a rip? Beside the point, good interview with Charles Payne on making money. Shout out to Charles Payne, friend of the show. And then lastly, this YouTube live stream. I'm sure we're going to see Ryan Cohen do more with Charles Payne, to be determined. But this is a very good strategy to get Ryan Cohen comfortable. It's not easy to do these things, to get him comfortable speaking and giving some details without breaking material news live on a show. I think we're going to see, you know, the best is yet to come with the company. Roaring Kitty's name is now back out there, and he's in hiding. You know, if he comes back, this thing is going to blow wide open. We all know that. And then lastly, I think I'm just very encouraged by the fact that Ryan Cohen is starting to use his voice and to give some of his opinions and to shed some business and general, you know, insights into where e-com is heading, where brick and mortar is heading. I think it's very, very valuable, and we're lucky to have him as a CEO. So let me know what you think in the comments below. I'm very encouraged, and I will talk to you all again real soon.